But there are a set of goals which are really about how well transit does its job. One is the question of promoting development, which we can argue about whether that's a worthwhile goal, but ultimately I would say that promoting development happens by making transit that's actually useful. Getting people out of cars, that's definitely something where you need transit to be useful to do it. I will say this is generally vastly oversold as a goal. That when we say this, we tend to think of some rich suburbanite in a Mercedes who will now need concierge service in order to use transit, and that's probably not who we need to be targeting. You can have a goal of reducing environmental impact, and ultimately to do that, transit needs to carry a lot of people. And that gets us to one of the most fundamental goals of transit. I would argue the most important goal of transit should be to carry as many people as possible, because that means you're helping as many people as possible. And it also plays into the fundamental advantage of transit. What transit does better than anything else, other than walking and biking, is use urban space extremely efficiently. What you see right here on the left is a train that holds 400 people, and all of those cars sitting in traffic on the right together hold 40 people. If we have limited space in our cities, which we do, transit uses that space better than anything else. It's actually amusing to think that in a typical office building, a cubicle that a worker is assigned actually has less space than the parking lot space that they are assigned in the parking garage. Our cars are given more space than we are, and that has a very real impact on urban form. This is a piece of Houston right here. On the left, you can see buildings and streets. On the right in red is all the space that is given over to cars. All of that is area that is not someplace somebody can live, that is not someplace that's generating economic activity, not someplace that is generating jobs. And our major dense employment centers simply cannot function without transit. And that's absolutely true for downtown Pittsburgh, just like it is true for downtown New York. And that means transit drives economic activity. In places where transit really works, and where the urban form really works with transit, it can be very impactful. For example, neighborhoods like this one in Toronto, a third of the households have no cars. That is a huge deal for people's household budgets. That allows people to live places they otherwise might not be able to afford to live. Or here in downtown Seattle, over the course of a decade, downtown Seattle grew 75% in population, 26% in jobs, and cut the number of cars going into downtown by 20%. That is what good transit networks can do. Now, I think it's important to note that what I have outlined as a ridership goal for transit is not the only goal for transit, that in fact, if you look at transit networks, they're doing other purposes as well. This is the Houston bus network. On the right is the routes that run every 15 minutes or better. And those carry about 3/4 of the ridership. The routes on the left add up to about 1/4. So well under half the routes carry 3/4 of the people. That is the highest quality service. But those other routes serve important purposes, and one of them is what we call coverage, the idea of providing a lifeline service even if there are not a lot of people who need it, because the people who need it really need it. This is a bus going up to a Swiss village, which has about 30 people living in it. The Swiss government has decided that if you live in Switzerland, you get transit service. So that bus drives up that hill to serve those people. And that is a worthwhile goal. So serving as many people as possible, providing a safety net, those are goals as well. I will say the kind of transit that you provide to do those things often looks very different. Those are often those bus routes that aren't straight lines, that sort of squiggle through a neighborhood to hit as many locations as possible.